Good afternoon and welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm Justine Reichman, your host, and today I have Tom Geary, CEO and founder of School of Thought. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Justine. Great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me today. We're excited to have you and to introduce you to the Essential Ingredients community. I've been excited to have you on to share with our community you and School of Thought, because I think that it is such a much needed conversation. I know that I struggle so often with putting words together, and it is a gift to be able to eloquently and succinctly communicate. So I'd love for you to just tell everybody, what is the School of Thought?
Well, about once a month, somebody walks into our office and says, can I take classes or something, or they confuse us with School of Rock. But the reality is that we are a creative firm that started in 2009, because my sense of timing is epic. And we've always been a strong creative shop, but over the last 7 or 8 years, we have basically really leaned into the sustainability world. And we kind of use sustainability in a very broad sense to mean things like diversity, inclusion, social impact, clean energy, food access, anything that is really purpose-led. And we've kind of leaned into that for 2 reasons. First of all, it makes us all feel better to be able to have a slight impact, helping our clients do some good. But also, the category, is earnest. Everyone is well-intentioned, but it's kind of, the usual suspects. The solar companies are using pictures of the sun. It's just, and there's sort of lots of earnest lectures that are well-intentioned, but not necessarily effective. And so what we're trying to do is bring best practices from other types of communication to a category that could really use a boost. And it's great to be able to make a difference.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, it does feel good to make a difference. I know that it's what gets me up in the morning, and it's one of the more important things that I value when I started my company.
It's great. I mean, we just, you kind of go from having the variety is important for us, for the team. And so being able to kind of work on clean energy this time and a healthcare initiative there. We worked on a vaccine hesitancy effort recently, trying to get more people to kind of overcome their concerns. And that was a really tough thing behaviorally to kind of address. But to be able to make a difference in whatever the respective category is just really, it's great when we can move the needle ever so slightly, sometimes literally in the case of the vaccine.
Well, the vaccine, I mean, that's a very relevant topic right now. And there's a lot of people talking about that, and there's people that are opposed to it. And I won't get into that with you right now, because we're not here to talk about that, although it's everywhere and anywhere right now. But what I would like to ask you is, when did this idea originate for you? I mean, I know the year, but I mean, like, how did it originate for you initially?
You mean opening School of Thought?
Yeah.
Well, I think I've always kind of been a serial entrepreneur. I had a shop when I was in my late 20s for about 5 years. I've kind of got tired of wearing all the hats and wanted to learn more as I needed to. And then I'd worked at a number of really well-known creative agencies all over the country, and just I wanted, when you work in a small company, you can get a lot more done very quickly and efficiently. I was working at a place with 600 people, and it took 3 weeks to open a job jacket, and it just kind of drove me nuts. It was like turning a super tanker. So, I knew that at the end of the day, a handful of people inside the 600 person agency actually do a lot. And so I knew that if I could get the right group of people and kind of bring our more nimble approach to bear, we could do a lot of good. And that's how it started. I mean, in a case of it's kind of a meta problem, we were talking earlier about how it's hard to sort of get out of our own way and have perspective about our own respective issue, which is why I'm a big fan of getting somebody outside the bubble. But, you know, truth be told, School of Thought was the 300th name that we came up with, and 299 of them were garbage. So it's, you know, everybody faces the issue of communicating their own offering. And so I have total empathy for anybody out there who's struggling, because I've been there too.
I guess it is a struggle, and it can be scary, especially when you go off on your own. Did you have, I mean, did you have any fears when you went off on your own as an entrepreneur? You went from a big company with security and 401ks and all those things, or were you just an entrepreneur that knew that this was your calling?
Yeah, it's a good question. The way we started, we secretly pitched an account for this consulting company, and it's kind of a small company, or mid-sized now, I guess. And we had no idea what the budget was going to be. And then we kind of won the pitch, and then they told us what the budget was. And I immediately did the calculation, and I'm like, oh man, we're gonna take a serious pay cut here. You know, I had no idea how we were going to. I think the first budget that we had, it was like, you know, $1,500 for, you know, a few computers and used computers and a printer. And, you know, I don't know what my pay was, but I was back to, you know, college, my part-time gigs in college.
Noodles, or a cup of noodles.
Yes, exactly. It was top ramen time. Once again, my wife was ecstatic. But I kind of had this faith, you know, and if you're wired to be an entrepreneur, you just kind of take the leap of faith. And I think, you know, by and large, it's been a good decision. I've done some things that people, or made some choices that people kind of can't believe. Like, for example, I was offered to be the chief creative officer at Salesforce, and I turned it down. And lots of people, including my wife, rightly say, like, what were you thinking? But, you know, if you're a dyed-in-the-wool creative, it's pretty hard to think about working on one brand for the rest of your life. And so for richer or poor, we are where we are.
Right. Yeah. Well, being an entrepreneur is not for everyone. And
that's true.
And I know myself, it gets me up in the morning doing my own thing and building my own business and changing the world one step at a time. So it's not the same thing as going to an office, but there's something to be said for working for a company that provides you that security too. So I'm not here to judge.
No, that's definitely the case.
People in the world to do their thing.
Yeah, no, everybody to each their own. You know, different people are. Yeah, there are lots of different ways to go, and it's not for everyone. But you know, it's there's something to be said, at least for me, in having a labradoodle who makes a lot of noise behind me. But beyond that, there's something to be said for having a own hand in your destiny. You know, trade-offs everywhere. I've never worked at a company that didn't have trade-offs. Big companies, small companies, and that's definitely the case with us as well. But generally speaking, I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I'm sure you've had your share of challenging situations and difficult moments where you've had to make really hard decisions. So maybe you can share, you know, one of those.
Oh, sure. No, I mean, gosh, challenging. Yeah, I mean, what are some challenging moments? I mean, there's a dynamic attention in what we do between the client's wishes and what they kind of objectively need. I was talking a little bit earlier about the sort of the tree hugger notion for some of our clean energy clients, facetiously, but they're not the target market by and large. They're far more passionate about the subject than we are, or than our audience is. And so sometimes you get into a situation where the client thinks X, and your job is to basically bring the audience to the table and say, we really think that the audience wants a different message or wants to be communicated to in a different way. So for example, we did a campaign for the Department of the Environment in San Francisco, and it was about recycling and composting. And I think the notion was, before we got into it, like, why are we even doing this? Everybody in San Francisco knows how to recycle and compost. But the reality is about a third of San Franciscans are transplants from places like the Midwest and elsewhere, where people didn't grow up with, 3 different colored bins. And so we thought, okay, it's a different audience than we thought. And so we had to kind of reframe the conversation. And so rather than lectures, which I think was kind of what the client was suggesting, we suggested using humor to disarm people so that they would pay attention to the message and it'd be more accessible. And it ended up working really well. We got about a 25% lift by using humor and all these kind of wacky San Francisco, idiosyncrasies, talking about the hills. If you don't recycle, we're going to add more hills.
Oh God.
And
and everyone loves funny.
Yeah, well, most people love funny, or at least if you can relate to it. When you're smiling at something, you don't think about it being an ad. Right. You just are smiling at it, and it's disarming. You're paying attention, and then hopefully you will receive the message.
And I can't stand roller coasters, so please don't add any more hills.
Yes, we got enough. It's true. I used to live on Mason Street, and it's tall enough. Pushing my son when he was 1 up the hill was not for the faint of heart. But yeah, we used a lot of kind of funny topical things to make people pay attention to the messages and to come up with a campaign that was more effective. But I think back to the point about tension, upriver, it was a challenge. I think the client kind of thought we can just go out there with straightforward kind of lecture-y headlines. And we felt like there was a better way to communicate. And luckily they were trusting enough to let us go with it. But, that sometimes happens.
But you have all these great clients that are all doing these better for you things, whether it's around sustainability or changing behavior. And that's clearly your focus. Am I right about that?
No, that's definitely our focus. We kind of, the the sustainability campaign that we did in San Francisco was one of our kind of first things, but we've done a lot of campaigns in healthcare, and we're doing a lot of work in diversity and inclusion. A lot of equity issues, social impact. It's all of these things it's just super important to be able to, I think one of the things that I think about with a lot of this is a lot of companies kind of go out there and they say, yeah, we've got to work on our diversity and inclusion. And a lot of them are talking about it. What is far better is to show that you're actually doing something. And so we thrive at basically helping clients demonstrate that they're actually walking the walk. Because, audiences, people out there are going to sniff out if your efforts are disingenuous. And a lot of people, unfortunately, are doing things for that, doing things for the wrong reason. And so if somebody's doing things for the right reason and they want to sort of demonstrate, help tell stories about these sustainable issues, we love doing it.
Essential Ingredients is powered by Next Gen Chef. Next Gen Chef is a movement that supports food and beverage entrepreneurs around the world by fostering a sense of community and providing its members access to mentors and a wealth of resources and guidance. Next Gen Chef feeds members with the knowledge they need to build better for you food and beverage businesses so the world can have greater access to healthier food, comprehensive food education, and increased affordability. If you like what you hear on this podcast, continue the conversation or ask new questions on the Next Gen Chef app, available in the Apple Store and Google Play. Follow Next Gen Chef on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook at Next Gen Chef. Join Next Gen Chef and let's change the future of the food industry together.
So, Tom, one of the reasons I was so excited about having this conversation is because, as you know, we're changing the future of food. People are working to change it every day. We're seeing, meats grown in laboratories, whether that's good or bad. We're seeing people, we're seeing people talk about plant-forward diets. We're seeing people talking about all these alternatives to dairy and all these different things. And there's all these people that are saying this is good and this is bad and all these different kinds of implications. And we have founders that listen and watch these videos, and we've got researchers. And I really want to be able to offer resources to all these new innovators and researchers and founders as they build their business to be able to really effectively communicate what they're doing. And so when we spoke, I was so excited because one of the greatest challenges, as you know, that I see is being to effectively communicate. So when we spoke and I was thinking about this with all these new things that are coming out there, I thought about you and I thought about, wow, with all these new things coming up, what an opportunity for people to hear from you, somebody that is changing the way people think and the way people hear and helping people recalibrate. And so what would you say to some of these people if they're listening? How could you potentially help them overcome some of the challenges and really craft something that would be effective and honest and communicate what they're trying to do and build a better
It's a great question. The thing that I think the biggest mistake that people make, we talked a little bit about the kind of being inside the bubble, thinking you're the target audience. That's one issue. So if you can sort of detach and think of, one thing I think about is it's good to be the consumer that you are at home versus the consumer that you are at work, or the business person that you are at work. So if you have got a new plant-based food invention that is coming out and you're really passionate about it, and this is your life's work and you're just driven by this, you're obviously going to be not the most objective person in evaluating it. But when you go home, you're the person who's fast forwarding through with the DVR through all the ads that you're skeptical about. If people can basically adopt the latter mindset, the skeptic that they are at home when they're evaluating their communications at work, they will be more effective. That would be one suggestion. Another thing is it's really important to have communication that has some stopping power, that's arresting. You can't start communicating to somebody until you have their attention. So that's always the number one thing. We've got clients who are looking at a social media ad or something, and they're looking at the tiny copy at the bottom, and I'll be like, don't worry about the tiny copy at the bottom, worry about whether or not somebody's going to look at this thing in the first place. That's your first goal, is to get people's attention. So if you're not grabbing them, if it's not emotional, if there's no reason to kind of stop people in their tracks, keep going. So those are a couple other things, or those are a couple of things that I think of. Another point that I like to make is to think about the competition. If everybody right now, I think there are 1 trillion tech firms that they're all using the exact same art direction. The design is the same. The typeface is this one typeface called Open Sans. My kingdom for a tech company that wants to come out and use something other than Open Sans, because we don't need another ad that looks exactly the same. People need to have, branding takes a long time and communications are hard. So give people a reason to be able to differentiate your message from everybody else's. Make the look distinctive, make the voice distinctive, do something that everybody else is doing in your category, and you're going to have a lot more success standing out.
Okay, I think those are some great tips. And for those that want to watch this, if you were just listening to it, you can check it out on the Next Gen Chef YouTube channel. Tom, my
With
last
our emotional support dog, Stella, in the background.
okay, and I've got two dogs around here, but they're being very good and quiet, so I'm not going to mess with that.
I know how that goes.
You know,
It's
barking.
be careful what you get.
Exactly. Before we wrap up, do you have any advice for young entrepreneurs? You know, you've had this long journey. I don't know if there's anything that you might have changed since you started your journey, but any last minute advice that you would give to these entrepreneurs that are just starting out?
When I had my first agency, I was in my 20s, and pros and cons to that, but I definitely wore too many hats. In fact, after 5 years, I closed the shop kind of when we were successful, but I was kind of cooked. And my resume for the next chapter was this kind of grid, almost an infographic with the hats that I had worn, pictures of the hats that I'd worn, and like, you know, IT, billing, all this other stuff, and then creative director, and kind of wacky different hats. And then I gave myself a grade for each of the roles that I'd worn. And I was great at some of those things, and I was atrocious at others. And everybody's that way. So try and, you know, don't try to do everything, I think would be my one bit of advice. You know, get complementary people. There are a lot of amazing people out there who are better at billing and IT and project management than you are. And, you know, hire them and let them do their jobs, because it will free you up to do whatever it is that you're great at with more energy and passion than trying to figure out, you know, why the config.sys or whatever it is on the PC isn't working. So delegating and hiring great people and kind of knowing your limitations would be my advice to Tom at 25.
Well, I would tell you that my dad would call those pearls of wisdom. And my mom gave me the exact same advice. When I was younger, she said, surround yourself with experts that know how to do all the things that you don't know how to do or you don't like to do, so that you can focus on the things that you're really good at doing.
Yeah, it's not easy for sure. And you know, we all have kind of a passion for our respective businesses and companies, and it's hard to let go, but it's a better use of your time and their time and everyone's energies, and your company will be the better for it.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. So if anyone wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to connect?
Well, this thing called email is kind of getting around. Tom at School of Thought works. And our website is surprisingly schoolofthought.com. That's
great. Okay, awesome. And are you on LinkedIn or any other social?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and Instagram is School of Thought, at School of Thought. Happy to communicate with anyone about any of their questions.
We'll make sure this is all in the show notes. So thank you guys all for joining me. Thank you, Tom, for joining me. And we're here every Tuesday at Essential Ingredients, which is powered by Next Gen Chef.
Thank you, Justine.
Thank you so much, Tom.
To find out more about this episode of Essential Ingredients and access show notes, check out Next Gen Chef and choose podcast in the menu bar. If you like this episode, head to iTunes or Next Gen Chef's YouTube channel to subscribe. Learn more about Next Gen Chef, the platform that powers this podcast, by checking out our website, or visit us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Next Gen Chef. You can also check out my Instagram at Justine_Reichman. If you have thoughts about this episode or future episode ideas, leave us a comment at Next Gen Chef's YouTube channel or drop an email at team@nextgenchef.com. Thanks for joining us.